Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this week's episode of the City Confessions. Today, we are joined by Kate Lombardo. She is a mindset coach, wellness educator, yoga teacher, and instructor, and a mom of two. She's also the co-owner and director of YogaRenew online teaching training and YogaRenew Hoboken. So, hi, Kate. How are you? And welcome to my podcast.
Hi, I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me. I am just so thrilled to talk to you and I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I am too. So, why don't we begin by having you introduce yourself to my listeners?
Yeah.
Tell us who you are and your relationship with New York City.
Yeah. So my name is Kate. As you kind of said in my bio, I am a wellness entrepreneur. That journey has been filled with many ups and downs that
Mm.
are mixed in with New York City as the fabric of it. But I am currently the co-owner of YogaRenew Teacher Training, which we're an online yoga teacher training. We basically sell teacher training courses where people get certified as yoga teachers and continuing education for yoga teachers. I also do business mentoring for other wellness professionals. And yeah, I'm a mom of two, which is my most important job. My son is 4 and my daughter is 1. And that's kind of, yeah, I guess like me in a nutshell.
I love hearing that. And because I'm a mom, I would love to touch on the mom aspect in a little bit.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
tell me about like your love for
Yeah.
yoga. When did this start and when did you decide, you know what, I actually want to pursue a career in this industry?
Yeah. So it's so interesting because my love of yoga actually came out of the challenges that I faced when I was living in Manhattan. So I'm a born and raised Jersey girl. I grew up down the Jersey Shore, the non-fist pumping version, as not according to the MTV depiction of us. But I graduated from Rutgers University, and then I had big dreams. I was involved in theater my whole life, and I had dreams of moving to Manhattan to pursue a career in theater, and that's exactly what I did right out of college. I, with like no fear attached, moved myself to the Upper East Side, despite people like kind of screaming from the sides, like it's going to be crazy and expensive. And I was like, it's fine. I'm 22. I got this. And it was, they were right. And I probably should have listened. It was like a pretty crazy experience where I found out, to really make things livable, especially this was 2008. So like not the best time financially in the
Mhm.
country. We were going through like the downfall of the housing and financial crisis. And I was waitressing instead of auditioning or doing anything because I like in order to be able to pay rent and make ends meet. And I actually, after months of being there, I suffered a health issue. My lung collapsed, which was not wouldn't recommend it and kind of like a freak thing, but it sent me into this. I was in the hospital with surgery. I didn't have health insurance at the time. So suddenly it was like I came out with hospital bills equal to my student loans. And that was a pretty crazy experience. And it was during the healing and the recovery of that when my life felt like totally out of control because it was this bubble that had burst. I stumbled into my first yoga class and it was at a local gym
Mm.
and I was a disaster. They were like, hold plank pose. And I was like, I have no idea what's happening. I didn't know what any of the poses were called. I couldn't really do much. But at the end of the class, when we got to Shavasana, the teacher just talked about breathing. And at that time in my life, like this idea of breathing and breath, the whole lung stuff represented such chaos in my life. And I felt like in that experience, it gave me back this power and sense of control that suddenly the thing that had caused me so much turmoil was causing me so much peace. And I think it was like I was instantly hooked. And I then went and did yoga at my house on a DVD for for a couple months because I was so embarrassed that I couldn't do anything, which is not what I would recommend now being where I am. But it set me on this path to pursue this. I didn't do that right away. I worked actually after that as a high school teacher for 5 years and was a student of yoga. And I wasn't really happy in my teaching job and decided at the end of that 5 years to pursue this as a full-time career. And now I'm aging myself, but that was almost 10 years ago now. So now for the last 10 years, I've been on this entrepreneurship path, focused on yoga and in the wellness industry.
Wow, that is definitely a journey, and I
It has.
admire you and commend you for sharing that. I know you mentioned that, the reason why you started or you got into that yoga class was due to the maybe, I don't know, like trauma and just like the bad
Yeah.
mindset that you were in. and also the bills. So it might be a personal question, but how did you end up, did you pay them off? Like, how did you get out of that
Such a good
rut?
question.
Because so many
Yeah.
people can listen to this and relate, whether it's them personally going through it or their parents or like, because that's life,
Yeah.
right?
Totally. Yeah. So that was probably like, if I think back, the financial fallout from that experience. Obviously, I was dealing with all the health stuff and the fact that I feel like what I imagined and envisioned for my life, like being in New York and I wanted this positive experience and then it
Mhm.
wasn't positive and I had to like move back in with my parents for a bit. Like it was kind of the trauma around that. But then there was the reality of like, oh, I have like a lot of debt and I don't have a job and what happens next. And with the my student loans, I had to just like start paying. So I kept waitressing. I was like substitute teaching to do that. And then with the hospital bills, I paid off a fair amount of them over time on a payment plan. And then some of them, it honestly became, which is like a whole other conversation with healthcare in our country, but like working with the healthcare providers and the hospitals to literally like negotiate and prove like that I was young and out of a job, and seeing there was some forgiveness on some of them where they decided like, okay, if you'll pay us this much, we'll forgive the rest. But it was like it felt like a whole other job in and of itself, and an experience of trying to like navigate how to get out of that financial hole, really. And it was super tough, and it was like not the best time. And then I think that's what pushed me into getting a job as a teacher, which I didn't major in education in college, but I did have an English minor. And so I like went back to school at the same time through they call it like the alternate route program. And I was able to teach and work. And I felt like the stability of that, like good health insurance, a steady job was needed because of the financial fallout. But what ended up happening in the long run is I also think it gave me the confidence and courage to pursue entrepreneurship eventually, because it was like usually what people fear, right, in leaving a steady job, if you will, is like, well, what if it doesn't work financially? And I already faced that. Like I had already been as broke as you could possibly be. And I think in doing that and sort of hitting that rock bottom early on, it removed that fear, because I was like, well, I did it once and I already worked myself back out of it. So taking the leap to pursue entrepreneurship, I was like, well, if I have to, I'll just do it again, and I can crawl myself back out of it. And so in a way, I think those early part of my 20s where there was a lot of challenges associated with that was actually building this like rock solid foundation for everything that was to come after. So I'm grateful for it now, looking back all these years later.
Yeah, it's always like in hindsight, you're like, okay, now I understand why it had to happen and why I'm
Totally.
where I'm at. But I do want to hear or dive deeper in. Did you get support? Because it must be so hard to be going through that. And I feel like I hear that you kind of got through it, and I'm so happy for you. But was
Yeah.
there like, yeah, people that supported you? Was there like an actual mantra that you were saying? Like what, because it's so hard. Like I feel like when you talk about a story, it's easy to kind of glance through the
Yeah.
actual struggles and just summarize it.
Yeah.
But it's like when you're in that predicament, I know you're
Yeah.
saying that it motivated you, but like, was
Mm-hmm.
there a certain
Like
routine?
when I was in like the thick of it, like how
Mm-hmm.
did I actually climb my way out?
Yes. Like,
Yeah.
did you have an
So
epiphany? Like, what was it?
yeah. So I definitely, in terms of support, I'm fortunate that I have like a wonderfully supportive family. My parents, and I have two sisters who were there for me. And my current husband now, we were dating at the time, and he was also like a huge support system for me in terms of just like having people emotionally to lean on. I think one thing I've always been pretty good at is like not being afraid to process emotions. And I will say that that was a time filled with like just like a lot of tears. Like I'm totally honest, like a lot of just like crying and talking about how, excuse my language, like how shitty it was. Like it
Mhm.
just felt so crappy to be in that position. And I think I just kind of like let myself sit in being sad for a little bit. And I feel like doing that simultaneously with when I found yoga, and it's a practice that of course there's a physical practice to it, but so much of it is focused on building mindfulness and
Mhm.
meditation and just being able to understand that like feelings of discomfort are temporary, and how do we just allow ourselves to feel that, because then on the other side of that is a sense of relief and comfort, like things will always get better. And I naturally have absolutely been an optimist my whole life, and I think the process when I was in that of just like talking through it with the people that supported me, letting myself cry and just be there in kind of the muck, and then taking actionable things to like make myself happy each day, even if it was small. So going to a yoga class or calling a friend and going for a walk, like those little things, and just saying like tomorrow's going to be a whole new better day was really, I think, the way that eventually I like climbed myself out of that. And I think I still like, thankfully, I haven't had anything that extreme in recent years, but I do think as an adult, like when I owned two yoga studios that were shut down right at the start of COVID at the time, and like lost those businesses, and I became a mom at the exact same time that that happened. And I think that I wasn't thrown into as much disarray because I think I had gotten so
Mm.
practiced at showing up and being like, okay, this isn't comfortable, and I'm gonna sit in this for a minute, and I'm gonna breathe through it and meditate and do what I need to do. But then I know that on the other side, like if I can create space and make choices to keep going, that I can figure it out. And I think sometimes as human beings, we forget that we can do hard things, and we're like more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. And I think it's easy to get lost in the like what if cycle of how long will this last and how long will this be, as opposed to saying like, okay, this doesn't feel good right now, but I can do hard things. So what can I do to make it 5% better tomorrow? And it's like those small baby steps, and all of a sudden in time it gets better. Like if that makes sense. I think
Of
that's what it was
course.
not trying to like do it all at once, and just trying to do it step by step.
No, that makes total sense. And I think like I'm a huge advocate for meditation and like being present and mindfulness. I think there's so much like power in just sitting still with your thoughts. And so many people can't
Totally.
do that. Like if they put a timer on just to be 1 minute, they will either stop, they'll quit, or they'll like get so consumed with thoughts. And it's not to say that when you meditate, you don't have these thoughts. Like you're gonna think about what
For
you're eating for
sure.
lunch. And
Yes.
but the whole point is to like keep practicing. And I think
Yes.
yeah, it has been a healing process for me in my own like, journey as well. So I can relate to you on that
I love that.
aspect. So this is a great
Yeah.
segue to talking about being a mom because I've had like
Yeah.
a crazy journey. I mean, my son is 15 months. So
Okay.
you said your daughter is one?
So my daughter's 18 months, so
18
3 months
months.
older than your
Okay.
son, and my son just turned 4. Yeah.
Okay, but tell me about like that because I mean, every pregnancy, every child is different. But going
Yeah.
from one to two and everything else,
Hmm.
being an entrepreneur, like how the hell do you balance it? Do you have help? Like, let's be honest.
Yeah, so I do have help, and I'm very fortunate. My journey into motherhood, it's so weird because so my son's birthday was April 1st of 2020. And I currently live in Hoboken, New Jersey, right outside of Manhattan. And Hoboken actually was the first place in the US to fully shut everything down, like 2 days before New York City did it. And he was my business, my yoga studio was shut down March 14th, and my son was born April 1st. So it was like in the thick of the pandemic. Like we went through the whole like, is my husband going to be allowed to be in the birthing room with me? Like what's going to
Mhm.
happen? And then I had my son, and we were like, from the time he was born at 8:40 p.m. on April 1st, I was back in my apartment at 9 p.m. the next night. Like it was less than 24 hours because they were like, we got to get you out of the hospital
Mm,
as quick. And I'm so fortunate that like I had a healthy delivery and all that, but it was a crazy time to become a mom when I was like, my businesses were shut down, and I was becoming a new mom, and I was fully isolated and no one could see us. So like that felt so insane. And I mean, it's all I know, right? Like I don't know what it would have been like if it hadn't been during that time. But so for me, the weird thing was that then when I had baby number two this past or November of 2022, um, the world looks so different. Like thank goodness, right? We were not in a lockdown. I had a new business that was like flourishing and up and running. And so the transition from one to two has been crazy because now there's two of them and your energy is pulled in 1,000
mhm.
directions. But I feel like I could have help, which like for my son, we literally couldn't. Like everybody was quarantined. So it was just me and my husband. Like we couldn't, his grandparents didn't meet him until he was 6 weeks old. Like there was just no one was able to help us in any way. And so I think moving from that experience where we were so isolated, and again, like we just had to figure it out because we can do hard things. And like we did it. So now when my daughter was born, I was like, oh, people are going to like come visit and bring me food. This is awesome. And in terms of running a business, we're super lucky that we have a nanny that is with us like 30 hours a week. I've made a choice to try as much as I can to work as like a part-time, full-time schedule. I think being in an online space allows me that flexibility where when my son gets out of school at 2:30 and I am home by 4 o'clock, and then my husband and I are kind of like home with the kids until they go to bed, and then after they go to bed I'll finish up work for the day. Just while they're little, like I want to try to be with them as much as I possibly can. And it doesn't make it easy. I feel like I'm definitely still pulled in, growing a business. Like that's like my first baby, right? Like I became an entrepreneur before I became a mom, and it's so important to me. And I think it's hard sometimes to like know that before becoming a mom, I used to be like, okay, I have this idea. I'm just going to work on it till
Mhm.
midnight tonight and just like go for it. But also I think that there's something healthier about saying like, no, like you have to stop, you put this away, like be present with your family, like that, you can wait till tomorrow for that. So it's been a push and pull, I think, of trying to be as present as possible with my kids, but also facing the idea that then I don't feel as present at work, and just trying to practice that. Like when I'm at work and doing the business, I'm at work and doing the business. And then when I'm home, trying to be as present as I can and step into mom mode. But that's like not easy, right?
Oh,
Like,
I
and
know.
I'm not furthest from perfect at that. I'm sure you completely understand.
No, I think that's the biggest struggle because I work from home
Yeah.
too, but I'm also not, I don't want to say the word stay at home, but it's also like I'm with my son all the
Yeah.
time. And that is in itself a full-time job, you know?
Oh my
And
God. The
I was,
hardest job.
yes. And I saw a TikTok video and they were saying that when your baby goes for a nap, it's like a timer starts. And you don't know how long that timer is. Because sometimes, granted, if it's, normally an hour and a half nap, that's great. But sometimes it could be 45, sometimes it could be 2 hours. So
Totally.
when that timer goes off, like your mind is like, what do I do? Do I take a nap? Do
Yes.
I shower? Do I,
Yes.
do work? By the time you make that
And then you're like, I
decision,
just wasted 10 minutes trying to
yes.
figure out what to do.
And then when you're like focused on one, you're kind of thinking about the other task. So it's like nothing ever
Mm-hmm.
gets done. Like it's always like
Mm-hmm.
20% in each task. And I could not, I was like, she said it so well. I'm like, that's exactly what it is. So it's like,
It's so hard.
it's so hard. It's like they have to go to bed for the night. My son goes to bed early
Yep.
so then I can do work, but also I'm so exhausted. Like I don't want to have
Totally.
to do
Yes.
work. But you have to like
Yeah.
tap into that, like, okay, you have to, otherwise it just will never get done. But
It's
like
true.
motherhood is like something else. But hearing your schedule now, do you still do yoga while being a mom and running a business?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm so lucky that yoga is kind of built into the fabric of what we
Hmm.
do, since the products we're putting out are yoga teacher trainings. And then we have our physical headquarters, which is also a yoga, like a working yoga studio. So I teach in person 2 classes a week, and then do a lot in terms of running all the online business stuff. And thankfully, because my office is like connected to the yoga studio, if I like, there's a 12:30 class that I can like pop into each day. It's not what it used to be, right? Like I used to be able to do it every single day, and that is certainly not the case. And even this past weekend, my daughter was napping and my son was having quiet time, quote unquote, in his room. And I was like, great, my husband's at the gym. I'm gonna go set up my mat and like do yoga at home. That ended within 5 minutes. My son was like in the room, and every time I was in down dog, he's like, this is such a cool tunnel. And it basically was
I know.
me doing a 30-minute yoga class with my son, like climbing on my back the whole
Yeah.
time. But, I think it's just also appreciating, it's interesting because my business partner, Patrick, like his two sons are a freshman and eighth grader right now. And when I first met him, his kids were like my kids' ages
Mm.
now. Like, and I look at that, and for me, that feels like it was 2 seconds ago. And now he always says, like, they're off doing their own thing. And I'm trying so hard to just remember that, like, and I'm sure you can appreciate and understand this. It's just like motherhood is just, it's 100% all the time, And I think
Mm.
it's like, it's so much because like I love all of these moments and I love being with them when they're this little, and I know I'm going to miss it desperately when it's
Mhm.
not there anymore. But it's like there's no break, and sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, like just for a second I'd want a breather. But then I think it's like, then one day they're not going to want to play with me
Yeah.
24/7. They're going to want to go with their friends, and then I'm going to be like, wait, like come back. And there's no 50-50 in it. It's like we're in it now when
Mm.
they're little, and then eventually they become kind of their own people. And I think then I'll miss it. So I'm trying as much as I can to just know, kind of like you said, like what's the mantra? It's like I'm gonna miss this so much one day,
Mhm.
So like trying to be there as present as possible. That's not always easy.
No, I
It's
know.
definitely is it bedtime yet? What
I
time
know.
is it? No, it's five.
I know. I get it. And then they go to sleep and then you're like reflecting on the day and then you miss them and then you're like,
I
but
miss them.
I've
I
been
know.
wanting you to go to sleep. So
You're like scrolling, looking at pictures
yeah,
and like
you're like,
looking in the baby monitor. I'm like, look how cute they are.
I'm like, what's happening?
I
Okay,
know.
so I would love to know, like, for the people who are listening and maybe they're not yoga experts, they want to get into it.
Mm,
I have like a love and hate relationship with yoga. Like, I love
sure.
yoga, but of course, I feel like if my mind is not there, I'm literally counting down and saying, like, when is this class over? Like, I don't want to
Yep.
be in this downward dog position anymore. So it's like, it really just depends. But I know there's a lot of
Yeah.
benefits. And when it comes to working out, because it is a workout,
Hmm.
you never regret it and there are always
Yeah.
benefits. But what are your tips for like yoga beginners on how to either get
Yeah.
through it or like certain techniques or anything you have to offer?
Yeah. I love this question. So I think the biggest thing is I feel like I don't know if stigma is the right word, but kind of a misconception that I'm trying to like debunk is I think that people feel like they're doing yoga wrong because their mind isn't totally quiet, right? Kind of like what we were talking about with
Hmm.
meditation. There's this like expectation, like, oh, I'm going to come to yoga and I'm going to just feel so zen immediately. And if I'm not zen, then like I'm doing it wrong.
Hmm.
And my thing is like, most of us are like, especially in the area that we live in, it's like none of us like does zen really exist. And I think it's like, it meets you where you are and remove the expectation that you have to do it perfectly because that's not what it's about. It's okay if you like don't want to be a down dog anymore and it's okay if your mind is a little busy. I think that part of what you're practicing again is like sitting in that discomfort. And what I love about yoga is that it it does challenge our mind also because it isn't
Hmm.
always quote unquote fun. It can be really hard. And so you're working out your physical body, but really it's a workout for the mind to start to train ourselves that like we can do those hard things and sit with that discomfort. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing I think is there's a yoga covers such a broad spectrum of styles. Like there's so many
Hmm.
different types of it. And I feel like I've met people who are like, oh, I tried one class and I didn't like it. I don't like yoga. And I'm like, that's like being like, I only tried chocolate ice cream and I don't like any ice cream at all. You know what I mean? Versus like, oh, but if you try vanilla or strawberry, you might love that. And or like, I don't like desserts because I don't like cannolis or something, And I think yoga is a similar thing. Like if you only try one class, like I would say try 5 classes with different teachers with different styles, and likely you'll be more drawn to one of them and then give that one a try again. I think a lot of practicing yoga is finding the style of yoga and the teacher that works for you because each teacher brings so much of their own personality to it. And it's a little bit of trial and error. Like some people are really looking for something that lends more towards that like slow, gentle pace where there's a lot of mindfulness. And then other people want a more athletic vinyasa style practice. And then, of course, there's somewhere in between. And I think it's like figuring out what you want and going after the style that fits your personality the best will help to increase the longevity of practicing in it. So, yeah,
No,
those
that's
are the
a
two
really
main
good
things.
point. I feel like it's not good to like just generalize yoga as just yoga. And just like with any
Yeah,
workouts, you figure out what works for you. There are runners, there are like strength training. It's like
totally.
and you can combine them and there's no right or wrong. So I love
It's
that
true.
you made that clarification. We are winding down, and because you heard previous episodes, I feel like you know what's
Yes.
coming. So my podcast is called The City Confessions, and I would love for
Mhm.
you, Kate, to confess something to us. And I always preface this again and again that it can be, personal, be however you receive it. It can be light,
Yeah.
dark. Yeah. So, Kate, what is your city confession?
My city confessional. Oh, I actually did think about this and I was like, what am I going to say? Because it's such a hard thing. I think, especially as it's related to New York City, like my confession is that I feel like my relationship with Manhattan and New York, it's like a long-term abusive relationship, right? And that I honestly feel like I had this like I idolized New York when I was growing up and I would come in and I would see Broadway shows and I was like, it's the most magical place ever. And then as I shared earlier, I like moved and was like, oh, I'm living in a basement for, at the time, at 22 in 2008, $1,000 a month, and there's like cockroaches in my bathroom. And I was like, it was like a terrible experience, and that like shoved me out. And I was like, I'm never going to New York again. And then I like got back on my feet, and all of a sudden I was like back in New York, and then I was working in New York and freelancing in New York. I was like, oh, this place is so fun. I'm back in and like captivated
Mhm.
again by the magic of it. And then I feel like there's been seasons like when I became a mom during the pandemic that I was like, I don't know, like I need to slow down a little bit more. It's too busy. Like, let me try to, like, maybe going into New York and doing all of this is not my thing. And now I feel like I'm back in a season that every time, like, you know, I'm living in Hoboken now, but I'm in the city fairly often. And it's like my husband and I were just there last week for dinner. And I'm like, I do love New York. Maybe we should move back. And I feel like it's like takes me on this
Mhm.
whirlwind cycle where depending on the year, depending on the season, you know, my confession is I think I'm in it forever though. Like I'm always going to be pulled back into New York. The magic of it exists. And I feel like that's kind of, I've had the good and the bad. And I don't know that that ever, it kind of follows, right? New York carries us almost like through our life, like the ups and downs of life. I feel like New York is right there with us.
Yeah, it's like that toxic relationship that you're like, I don't
Yeah.
want, but also like I do secretly
It's
want.
so fun though. Yeah, that's exactly it. I think that's exactly what I feel like. I like can't say no to it.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so now we have a fire round of New York City questions. I'll
Okay.
ask you 5 questions and you can answer it with the first word that comes to your mind. You ready?
Okay.
It's very
Hmm.
easy, it's simple. Okay, so if you can describe New York City in one word, what would it be?
Unique.
What's your favorite thing about the city?
The way that it looks at night, I feel like it holds this, there's just like a magic. And I pass it every, like I can drive home and I get to look at the skyline every night. And I've lived in Hoboken now for going on 12 years, and it never loses. Like every single night when I look at New York, I'm like, man, it's just the coolest in the world.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then the flip side, what's your least favorite thing?
Oh, I really don't like traveling. Like I like being on the subway or on
Mm.
like any underground travel. I like love that it exists because it's the most important thing. And if I go to other cities that don't have it, I'm like, how do people live?
Mhm.
Like, of course we need this. But also, like every single time I start walking down the stairs, staying subway, I'm like, oh, the smell, and it's hot in the summer. Like, it's absolutely my least and like favorite part,
Yeah.
in a way.
And then what is your like go-to spot or restaurant?
Mm. So it's funny. I feel like I hop around a lot, but my husband and I just went to Craft in like the Nomad. It's like Tom
Mhm.
Colicchio's restaurant. And it's been there for a long time, but we went and celebrated our anniversary there recently. It's kind of a place that we do like a nice dinner out to celebrate any like bigger occasions. And I think because I associate it always with something like that, it's
Mhm.
probably like my favorite place to go out for dinner. Um, yeah, that's definitely. I also am like oddly the person that really, I don't know if this is like it's slightly more touristy, but I like love Hudson Yards. And I feel like every time I go, they're like, why do you want to go there again? Like, who goes and hangs
You
out
know
there?
what's
And
funny? I don't think it's
I like
tourist.
love it.
I don't think it's touristy because when I go there, it's like
There's
very
like no one
calm.
there.
Yeah.
I know. I think
I
that's
think
why I
it's
like
yeah,
it.
I think it's because of the location. Like people don't want to travel all the way there. But it's actually
It's
really
true.
lovely. Like you can
It
honestly
is.
do work there. Like that's a secret tip
Yep.
for those listening. Like
It's
nobody's ever
it
there.
is.
You
No.
can nobody really shops either. I feel like they just use like
No, it's like
Hudson
it's like
Yards.
it's so true. There's like all these beautiful facilities, and even there's this restaurant that's actually another one of my favorites, Chisiamo, that's there,
Yeah.
and I love it. It's like fantastic Italian food, but the way that Plaza is set up, it
Mhm.
almost feels like a European piazza. It's
Mhm.
like restaurants and little bars, and like they overlook outdoor seating, and you can just sit and hang out, and it's like empty all
I
the time,
know.
and it's clean, and I'm always
Yeah.
like, why does no one come
I
here?
know.
So,
That's like our little secret
yeah,
tip.
I know.
And then the last question is if you can thank New York City for one thing, what would it be?
Mm. For the most important lessons that I've had in life and teaching them to me early, I think.
Mm,
Um, I think New York, it like tests your limits and teaches you what you're made of. And I am just really grateful for that because you you kind of have to face who you are, so to be able to like to make it through anything with related to New York. I think it shows you the good things and the shadow sides of things. And
Ooh.
it's the combo of both, I think, that really that makes us who we are. And I feel like it puts it right in it's like the best mirror you could ask for.
Wow, I love that analogy. And what a beautiful way to end this podcast. So,
Yeah.
for those listening or watching, be sure to expand the show notes. But I would love to hand you the floor. Kate, how can we support you? Do you have any secret projects you're working on? Tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, thank you. So you can find me most active on Instagram at kate.lombardo, and then my company YogaRenew at YogaRenew on Instagram. And in terms of projects, we are putting out a streaming app of all the different classes that we teach with workshops and live like spiritual experiences, mindfulness, all of that. And our mission is always to make it as accessible and as low cost as possible so the most people can access it. And I feel like that's a really important thing. So if you want to join us there, we're trying to just build that community and say hi to me on Instagram. I like love to just connect with people. So yeah.
Love that. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me on this episode.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for everybody who's listening. Be sure to share this with a friend, positive review. And with that being said, I will see you all next week. All right, bye.
Bye. Thank you.